I kept running. He passed near me and whispered, "Freaking earthlings." I used to work in a preschool. £150 bearded man. I'm decidedly not Melissa. I'm a mailman, and one day a little girl came to the door to get the mail. She looked up at me with a big smile and said, "Thank you, whaleman." I spent the rest of the day thinking about how much more interesting of a job that would be. When I was 4, I told my entire family at my birthday party that my wiener got big whenever I needed to really pee. My grandmother nearly died laughing. As a child, my brother didn't like peanuts. As a treat after dinner one Sunday we had cornetas. My brother peeled the wrapper off and then turned to my dad and said, "Dad, can you nibble my nuts off?" My aunt wet herself laughing. We were bringing lunch to the teachers at school and my daughter announced that we made a special soup for Mr. S because he's a virgin. Mr. S is a vegan. And from that day on, the 40-year-old Mr. S has been trying to imply that he was not a virgin to the other teachers, while still maintaining professionalism and not appear creepy. Went to McDonald's once and headed for the bathroom. Just before I opened the door, this small child busts through with his friend and he yells, "I ain't washing my hands. I'm a bad boy." This happened 4 years ago and I still laugh about it. I was in a McDonald's bathroom when I was in middle school 20 or so years ago, and the kid in the stall next to me very loudly said, "Grandma, why do you have hairs all over your butt?" I still giggle every time I think about it. At a British airport the other week, American mother and very young son in the family/disabled cubicle. He very loudly exclaimed, "Mom, your butt's so big. Like so so big." And she proceeded to thank him. I died of silent laughter. At the zoo watching a rhino and a young family is next to me. Out of the blue the rhino got an erection, something brought to my attention by the young boy yelling, "Whoa, look at his wiener. Is yours that big, daddy?" The father turned bright red while the mother laughed her ass off. My son after wearing pants all winter and switching to shorts. "Dad, I need sleeves for my legs." My daughter wanted to wear tights one day. "Dad, can I wear my sock pants?" "Mommy, check out my cool nipple." Belly button. The word she was looking for was belly button. My daughter at maybe 2 or a little under proclaimed to our family that my daddy, me, has a front tail. A little background. When my daughter was little, she would make any excuse to try to sleep in our bed. We also had a lab named Morty who fell in love with her the day we brought her home from the hospital and followed her around until the day he died. One night, she told me, "Mommy, I can't sleep in my bed because Morty left all of his dog feathers in it." My niece was 3 when my nephew was born. She came up to me and my girlfriend when we visiting my sister in hospital and said, "So am I not allowed to punch the baby in the head?" Uncle had a tick in his ear. When we went camping my nephew pronounced ticker stick and would not stop shouting, "Uncle Tom's got a big old dick in his ear," over and over again. My husband was pulled up for random breath testing. As the cop told us we were fine to go on our way, my youngest child piped up, "Well, that went better than last time." Turns out he meant last time hubby was rumted. He bitched about it because it was raining and the shoulder he was pulled up on was boggy. Family went to Olive Garden restaurant. Waitress delivers the obligatory bowl of salad with the salad tongs. I proceed to start mixing up the salad with the tongs. My 4-year-old daughter sits up and stares into the bowl and then looks up at me and asks, "What are you looking for?" My 7-year-old son slept on the top bunk of a bed with his brother down below. He's a bit of a tank and was sitting around 28 kgs. One night he asked me to put him to bed and I said, "Mate, you're getting really heavy. I'm not sure that I can lift you all the way up that high anymore." He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, you just need to believe in yourself." Was out to lunch with my fiance, her parents, and my 4-year-old niece. I gave her a quarter so she could get some Skittles from the candy machine. We are driving home, and she is intentionally offering everyone Skittles and telling me I can't have any. All of a sudden she looks at me and asks, "What is that in your hand?" I show her my empty hand and she says, "No, your other hand." I was pretty confused and opened my other hand to show her there was nothing in it either. She looks at me with this crap-eating grin and says, no Skittles. Me, how old do you think grandpa is? 5 years old nephew, .12. Me, no, he's actually 62. Nephew, ooh, he's going to die soon. I used to ask my little cousin, around 5 to 6 years old at the time, if she knew any swear words. She started listing off all the bad words she knew. Hate, stupid, crap, frick. Wait, what was that last one? It escalated so quickly and nonchalantly that it had me dying. My partner's 5-year-old daughter was watching me do my makeup in the mirror, and she said you looked like an angel. That's the sweetest thing she's ever said to me, so I gushed like a teenage girl, and thanked her with a big grin on my face. Then she elaborated, you look like you're dead. A few years ago I had my nephew, who was about 13 at the time, and my son, then around 6, in the car with me. We were visiting grandma out of town, and I was pointing out stuff from my youth. Me, I used to get my hair done there, when I was young and pretty. 13, being a tool, but clearly joking, you were never pretty. 6, indignant at this insult to his mother, you don't say that, she was 2. It was just a long time ago, I saw pictures. Thanks, buddy. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Long haul truckers, what's the creepiest / most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? Maybe a bit off the mark, but it still scared the crap out of me. I was headed west on I-76 here in Denver, just cruising along at about 70 miles per hour. Out of nowhere, I saw a massive, almost solid cloud of what looked to be dirt coming at me. I'd say it was at least 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. I scanned ahead of me, but couldn't see any vehicle it could have came from. With nowhere to go, I slowed down and took the hit, hoping there wasn't anything big enough in there to come through the windshield or jack up my truck owner/operator. It was pretty loud as I smashed through it. The instant it hit I knew it wasn't dirt though. I immediately hit the washers, because I couldn't see a damn thing through all of the carnage. My windshield was painted with guts. Turns out it was bees, freaking huge bees, that sounded like rocks when they hit. I can't even imagine seeing that swarm if I was walking. They would kill the crap out of anything in their path. I was driving near Las Vegas at around 3 AM. I had been following a few black subs along the highway for a good hour or so. They had Nevada plates that were single-digit numbers in order, 1, 2, 3. Suddenly they all pulled off the highway down a dirt path. There was no mile marker or cactus that would indicate a path there. It was just dirt. After pulling off the road they all turned their lights off. I didn't stick around. It was creepy. According to the DMV website, special license plates are also issued to a number of Nevada law enforcement agencies, state elected officials and the Nevada congressional delegation. Plate 1 belongs to the Nevada governor. 2 belongs to the lieutenant governor. This is my father's story, and he wasn't a long-haul trucker, but rather a 18-year-old gas station attendant in the late 70s. And without a certain long-haul trucker I probably wouldn't be here. The gas station was 24 hours and my dad was the only one working the night shift, 11 to 7 I think. A guy comes in and just gives him the creeps. Seems sketchy. He was wearing tight jacket/pants and you could tell he had something in his pants under the jacket. It was during the summer and was warm, so why is he wearing a jacket to begin with? It was later confirmed he was on drugs. A lot of truck drivers used this station as it was the only one open 24 hours for a long stretch of the highway. They also had a big lot where they let truckers park and sleep or take a break. On this night at this time it was just my dad, sketchy dude, and one trucker in there he kinda knew, as in, came in frequent enough to be conversational, and asked if he'd stay in the station and hang out until sketchy dude left. Well, after looking at the stocked shelves for several minutes, while sneaking peeks at my dad behind the counter, the sketchy guy eventually looked fed up, and got into his blue car and sped off. Cool trucker guy hung out with my dad a little longer until another couple of guys came in. To use the booth they had to eat a sandwich. I should also point out this was pretty middle of nowhere rural southeast United States in the 1970s. CB and landline was it. My dad only had a landline in the store. Dad did not have any protection or weapon of any kind. So the hours pass, and my dad had shaken off the paranoia when all of a sudden this guy in a car comes hauling ass into the lot, jumps out, and sprints into the store hollering he needs a phone. He didn't have a CB, nor did he see a phone at the other station. He also wasn't familiar with the area, and my dad's station was the first place he found. Calls 911 to report that he had walked in on a gas station 40 miles back, next closest station, to find the attendant shot and dead. No one else around. and the only other piece of information is that a blue car was speeding out of the lot when the trucker pulled in. Apparently they eventually apprehend the guy in the blue car. My dad confirms it was sketchy dude from earlier in the night, and they charge him with murder and armed robbery. To the long haul trucker who waited around with my dad that night, thanks, and hope you're keeping it real. Also worth adding, that apparently sketchy guy in blue car was already a bad apple who was either being looked for, or on probation or something. He was in the system. I was coming back home from a trip from Michigan and I saw these people wearing cult-like robes. One in town, one on a highway, and one in a park, all staring at me. I'm a truck driver in the UK. Was driving through rural Scotland one night going down a country lane. All of a sudden I start to see flashing lights come through the trees. Lights of all colors flashing through the trees and causing some really freaky looking shadows on the road. I'm not a believer of aliens or anything, but my first thought was UFOs. Safe to say I put my foot down and got out of there. Found out the next day it was rave happening in a field, but at the time it didn't half scare me. Creepiest. Driving I-30 through Texas and Arkansas, I would see what looked like animals/faces popping out of the bushes, but longer than a glance proved nothing there. They had just paved the highway, and there was hardly any traffic. I was dead tired. It was super dark. Highway hypnosis, I suppose. Paranormal. When I went to local driving, my route ran near an air reserve base in Indiana, so you'd see planes and helicopters pretty often. One night, about 2 a.m., I was headed to pick up another load when I saw a bright green light in the corner of my windshield. It was too low to be an aircraft. It moved pretty slowly, then darted and I lost sight of it behind some trees I drove by. Typical I saw a UFO crap, but I still think it was just a helicopter or a jet that I saw at the prefect angle that turned after a takeoff. The jet pilots have broken the sound barrier over town a couple times in the past. Sonic boom. So a jet flying abnormally isn't necessarily out of the realm of possibility. Just bad crap crazy. Driving south on I-75 in the winter in Ohio, I witnessed a compact car like a Cobalt or similar get on the on-ramp to merge into I-75 north and lost control. They went sideways, fell at least 6 feet off the ramp, and onto the shoulder of the interstate landing on all four wheels, spun 360 degrees, and then proceeded to merge into traffic like it was freaking nothing. Blew my freaking mind. The CB radio was going freaking nuts for about 5 minutes. Holy crap, who else just freaking saw that, etc. Myself and 2 friends had to drive from Laredo, Texas to Baton Rouge, Louisiana one night in my Ford van. It was about 2 a.m. There is a particularly long and dark section of highway just outside Laredo, no buildings, towns, or lights for about 50 miles. I was in the right lane coming up on a truck, and pulled out into the left passing lane. As I was slowly overtaking this long truck, my peripheral vision caught a sudden movement of this big truck towards the right shoulder. I saw the truck was swerving to avoid hitting a person dressed in all white face, whose arms were folded across the chest and eyes were closed as they walked across the highway. I swerved to the left and barely missed this ghostly looking person with my passenger mirror. Can still remember seeing that the eyes were closed. That's how close we came to hitting this person. I was 23, my newly married husband and I decided driving team would be a fun adventure after college, rather than jumping into the 925. I was down in Arizona, on a long stretch of nothing about 4 a.m., when a guy pulled up next to me waving his CB. I never left mine on. Listening to those guys BS was irritating. I turned on my CB, and he told me I had a blown tire. I thanked him, figuring I would stop at the next truck stop. He kept harassing me to pull over and check my tire for a good 40 miles. I finally got to a next town and pilot truck stop, got out and checked my truck. No blown tires anywhere. No clue what that guy would have done to me, but so glad I trusted my gut and didn't stop. Not paranormal, but I have plenty of stories as a young woman on the road. I drove by a marsh every night when I was going home from work. One night I saw a car pulled over with hazards on. Dude was head to toe covered in blood. No crash, no injury, just covered in blood. Maybe he just had one hell of a bloody nose. When my father was younger, they had a few animals. When they took them to get slaughtered, they would bring back meat for personal use, rest was sold, and a few buckets of blood for a few different uses, blood pudding, etc. One day, my uncle had to brake hard due to animals running across the road. No crash, no injury, but he ended up covered in blood. Inside of car looked like a gruesome murder scene. My stepdad is a truck driver and I asked him this question and he gave me 3 answers. In Winston-Salem, NC, a guy was masturbating while driving by his truck and my stepdad threw his water bottle at him. Another time he said he was up near Oregon, and he was the only one on the freeway at the time, since it was around 2 a.m. and something large and pale swooped down a few yards in front of his truck and swooped back up into the tree line. While driving at 70 miles per hour, a tire rolled ahead of him and went across the median, nearly hitting another car. I wanna know more about the pale swoopy thing. Edit. If I get one more reply saying owl, I'm gonna freaking lose it. Edit. Lost it. Okay, I've been forced to turn off notifications. There was an owl on top of my car. My mother in Florida is asking why she's receiving texts or pictures of owls. I concede defeat. I hope you owl all happy with all y'all lives now. Legends of the swoopy pale are few and far between. It is thought that its swoopy paleness is enough to kill most who see it, but the few who live to tell the tale all say the same thing. It's as pale and it swoops. Edit. My autocorrect now automatically capitalizes swoopy. Saw a clown staggering down an alley in the city, back facing us, while we were coming to a stoplight at like 1 a.m. Looked like he was still blowing balloons, or masturbating. Not seeing his face made it more ominous. I'm not sure if it's either really creepy or sad. Maybe he was on his way to abduct children, or maybe he was blind drunk after a long day. Wow, balloons is a lucky guy. My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho and driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared, and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on, and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grade and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer it jumped down, and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound it leaped down, and then leaped over to the other side of the embankment. At the time he thought it was a Sasquatch. Now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain. A few years ago some animal rights activists managed to release thousands of mink from a farm next to a large road. At night, the road was more blood than tarmac 4 miles. Remains everywhere, and don't even get me started on the smell. My great uncle was a long-haul trucker, and he swears that one time he was driving down the road to see 2 guys pull a rolled up carpet out of the trunk of their car and throw it in the river. Whether that's true or not I don't know, but it's still creepy nonetheless. It was probably true. My friend, his wife, and several neighbors last year saw a large car drive to the river at the end of their street in Indianapolis and dump a girl's body, all in broad daylight at like 2 p.m. Of course the car sped away. My friend and another neighbor run up to the side of the river, and it's definitely a girl/woman's body. Said he wanted to throw up, and did later on. This girl/woman had obviously been murdered. They got the license plate, but do not know if the people were ever caught. I'm a log truck driver in the Pacific Northwest. We go up into the woods on logging roads and haul logs back from the loggers to sawmills. We start work very early in the morning, 2 to 5 a.m., so it's nighttime obviously. One of my co-workers pulled away from the job and started down the logging road. After a couple miles, after the load had settled a bit, he decided to pull over and throw his remaining wrappers around the load. As he is tying his load down, he looked back and saw a mountain lion watching him from 10 feet off of the end of his trailer. He slowly backed up to his driver door and got in. By the time he looked in his mirror the lion had disappeared. My dad has told me this story a couple times and each time it always kind of weirds me out. He is not a trucker, but when he was in the military one night him and a buddy went out to get food. About halfway into their drive down a dark road my dad and his buddy noticed a woman in a red dress with black hair walking. My dad and his buddy found it odd because it didn't seem safe and it wasn't that warm. My dad said deep down he knew stopping was a bad idea, and so they drove by a little more slowly to get a glimpse to see if she needed help. As they drove by my dad and his friend both swear she has no face. Instead there was just a black hole, as if she had been in a wreck and her face was taken off. It freaked them both out so badly my dad floored it, and when they stopped to eat both of them agreed they saw the same thing. Come to find out a woman had been killed earlier that year in an accident. They were talking about it when a stranger told them the sightings of the woman were actually common. I'm not one to believe in the paranormal, but the story is still kind of weird. Okay, so here is a spook for you, and to this day I still have no idea WTF. so I was in the VA/MD area and had a lot of work related sites ranging from downtown Baltimore to Virginia Beach and all around. Friday wrapped up, and I hit the road to some social arrangements I had made for the weekend. Spent the weekend with friends out in various parts of VA, got dragged off to other places even further out, the usual weekend fun times. It's late Sunday night when I have to leave, or I'm not going to be able to get home in time to start my, thankfully late afternoon, Monday. I'm fully rested. I didn't do any drinking. I'm not into drugs. On the highway at about 3 AM, in the middle of bumfrick nowhere between Roanoke and DC, absolutely nobody around. I'm cruising along in the left lane simply because nobody else is around. No headlights for the past hour, no tail lights either, no road lamps either. It's dark, it's mildly damp, it's foggy. I have the music up, I'm feeling good, all is fine. And then I just happen to look to the left and there is a freaking dog barking at me. A German Shepherd, in a car passenger seat, somewhat blue glow from the instruments inside the car, and it's got its face to its window and it's barking its head off at me. I get a good hard look at it too, because at first my brain is not registering cop car, dummy. I'm doing 90 plus in a 75. I promptly have the oh shoot moment when the dog, the instruments, the white Crown Vic / light bar all click in my brain after a second hard look. I put my foot on the brakes and start slowing down hard but safe to pull over. I even put my blinker on to start shifting lanes over to the right to pull over because, wait, there is no shoulder on the left side of this road. I look back to my left, where there is still no shoulder / room for another car, and it's just gone. No trace. I slammed my brakes and stopped in the middle of the freaking highway, flipped on all my light bars and even looked around with my handheld spot. There was nothing. No tail lights, no headlights, no engine sounds, nothing. There are no other tire marks in the damp but mine, and I can see for a nice long distance both ways too. Nothing. My vehicle had great visibility and a lot of extra lighting, off-road sub with the trimmings. There is no possible way somebody pulled a sneaky, let alone drove that fast on wet sloped grass and rocks on my left side. So, yep, there you have it. Ghost cop and his dog didn't like me speeding, apparently. It was a warning to slow down cause you were gonna crash. They saved your life. According to someone else in this thread, when you are about to fall asleep, you may start to hallucinate animals. That might have been what was going on, or you might have just seen a ghost lol. Not a long haul trucker, but thought this would fit here. Also on mobile, so sorry for format. My mom, sister and I were on our way to a baseball game of mine during my junior year of high school. This was in northern New York, so spring got a little chilly at times. The main road we took stretched about 35 miles, and was nothing but cornfields and tree lines. We hit a stretch of the road that was super foggy for no reason, so my mom slowed down to a proper speed. We finally reached the end of the fog and we all looked to the left to see where we were. About 50 yards from the road was a man and woman in what appeared to be wedding clothing from at least 100 years ago. Man wearing a big top hat and the woman wearing a very old looking white dress, holding hands with their backs to us walking towards the woodline. We drove past, and I just remember the silence in the car until my mom said what the frick was that? Till this day, whenever we are together, and one of us tells the story we all get goosebumps. A friend of my cousin was a long-haul trucker. He was making a delivery across the country, and was in a hardly used dirt stretch of a rural route. Since the road wasn't exactly peachy, he had to drive slowly. He sees another truck slowly approaching from the opposite direction, and he sees the truck is the same as his. Since this isn't fairly uncommon, he didn't think much of it, but as the other one grew closer he decided to honk in recognition of having the same kind of truck. The other one replies and all is good. That is, until they narrowly and very slowly had to pass one another. He turned to look at the driver and he saw himself. Not a reflection, not a similar person, but his exact same copy, same clothes, same hat, same red beard, staring at him. They passed each other, and that was that. He told me he'd seen very weird things, but that was the moment he decided to stop being a trucker. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Welcome. These stories today come from r/today I fricked up. Enjoy. Today I fricked up by sitting on my right testicle and blacking out because of the pain. TLDRLS in the title. It was our average summer vacation day. I woke up late, ate breakfast, blah blah blah. Then I made a Nutella milkshake, which is actually really tasty, and went to sit down on the living room chair. That's when disaster struck. I don't really know how and why, probably the angle I was about to sit on, but I sat on my right testicle. The pain was insane. I jumped off the chair and started walking out, in pain. Suddenly I had black spot clouding my eyes, and the next thing I know, I'm on the floor with my milkshake over me and my mom screaming. I blacked out for a few seconds, and honestly it was the scariest few seconds of my life. I had a pounding headache, but at least my right testicle didn't hurt anymore. I'm fine now, and my mother calmed down before calling the ambulance. That was the first time I ever blacked out, and I honestly was really scared. Edit. A lot of people are asking for the Nutella milkshake, so you must heat your Nutella just enough so it becomes more of a liquid. Then you add it to warm milk and shake, or use a blender. You can add chocolate ice cream for more flavor BTW. Edit 2. Everyone worrying about my testicle. Please don't. I didn't sit on it that bad, and I don't think I fainted just from the pain from that. I don't drink water a lot, so it was probably also from dehydration. If there is something wrong, it wouldn't stop hurting 40 seconds later. Today I fricked up by accidentally telling over 100 strangers I was about to jack off. Posted this as a comment somewhere else, and a buddy said I should post it here. This happened a little while back. I was playing EVE Online, and said goodnight to everyone, and exited the game, but forgot to mute my mic or turn off mumble. I had turned the mic on the auto setting to that night, so I didn't have to hold a key or anything, which is really uncommon, since they usually have strict rules about that. That being said, I naturally forgot about my mic, and had just taken my headset off. Walked upstairs with the headset around my neck to grab a beer, while singing and beatboxing. Exaggerated DJ voice. I'm about to beat this duck. Imma beat it. I'ma beat it. Woo Imma beat it. I'ma beat it. Woo. This went on for about a minute. About halfway through my song I start hearing quiet noises from my headset. I realized it wasn't off, so I put it back on to see what everyone's talking about, thinking some cool stuff was happening, since it was really quiet when I got off. I immediately hear about 90 people losing their shit laughing, with others saying holy crap, does he know? And I'm talking that raspy crying sounding laughs, where you're just pushing out air. I sat there for a few seconds, freaking horrified, since these are just random people from my massive corp, before whispering did you all hear all that? And about 20 people started singing it back, and others started yelling duck at the top of their lungs in their own DJ voices. For those of you who don't use Mumble, there's a feature that shows who's talking at the time on an in-game overlay, and since it was dead quiet except for the occasional until message, everyone knew it was me. The worst part of this was I was always super professional and serious sounding when talking on there, and there were over 150 people in Mumble on that specific channel. So for the entire time I was in that corp, every time I got on and said something in Mumble, at least a couple people mentioned that, or started singing that song, prompting other people to ask what the fuck is happening, and thus I had to relive that almost every time I played for over a year. TLDR, accidentally left mic on after leaving game, sang a song about jacking it, while over 100 people listened in. They didn't stop reminding me about it until I stopped playing about a year later. Today I fricked up by accidentally putting Mentos and Diet Coke in my mouth at the same time in a foreign country. Being half Japanese, I take a trip to Japan every 2 years with my dad to visit relatives, sightseeing, etc. Unfortunately I was never actually taught Japanese, so having my dad there with me is super useful when I need assistance. On our trips my dad usually takes a day to go hang out with his old friends. We live in the US, and usually leaves me at our hotel, or whatever. Today was one of those days. While laying in bed watching PewDiePie's Minecraft videos I got quite hungry and thought to myself I can go down to the convenience store and get some snacks by myself, right? Normally, yes. So I take a couple thousand yen that my dad left me and walk to the nearest Family Mart. For those of you who don't know, it's a Japanese convenience store. I browse the shelves a bit and up buying a bento meal, Mentos, and a Diet Coke. Checking out goes fine, since I don't really need to communicate, just hand over money. So as I walk back to my hotel in the middle of a crowded sidewalk, my dumbass decided to pop a few Mentos in my mouth just because. So I suck on those for a while, and then without even thinking about the consequences I take a huge swig of Diet Coke, like so big that I can't swallow all of it, and it's just sitting in my mouth. Then all of a sudden feel a very weird foaming in my mouth. Then it hits me. I remember the experiments I did in elementary school, the crazy Russian hacker vids, etc. That was the very moment I knew I fricked up. So before I can think literally anything else, it's foaming out of my mouth, and I choke a little and end up just spewing out this Diet Coke foam. So obviously the people around me notice and come up to me and start speaking Japanese. And of course I'm sitting there, completely clueless. They were probably asking me if I needed help. I'm dying of sheer embarrassment, so I deadass just bolt back to my hotel with foam dripping down my face and clothes. I'm feeling sticky everywhere, and life is not good. Once I get back to my hotel room and start to settle in, I remember that I left my actual food on the sidewalk. So I just ended up starving until my dad came home and brought some leftovers. Today I fricked up by being funnier than my so and allowing her to post it on Reddit. This happened last night / the wee hours of this morning. Last night while my so was at work, she asked me to pick up tampons on my way home. She is a bartender and didn't want to stop at a store or gas station late night when she got off. Me, being a guy, completely forgets until about 30 minutes until she is scheduled to get off work. So I jump in the truck and haul ass to the nearest 24-hour mega store. Or future content. Serious, what stories about WW2 did your grandparents tell you, and or what did you find out about their lives during that period? Edit. Wow, I really did not expect it to blow up like this. THX for all the love. These kind of stories should be remembered to show that war sucks. One grandfather was in the 8th, fighting in the jungles of Papua New Guinea on the infamous Kokoda track. He had nightmares about his experiences for the duration of his life and only spoke about it to me briefly when I was a kid. He mentioned that he would often cut his own path through the thick jungle because the Japanese would hide up in the trees and ambush them. He wasn't a fan of the bully beef and was constantly soaked through due to torrential rain and mud. He never smoked, but would win cigarettes off his mates in card games, then light them and hang them from the entrance to his tent to help keep the swarms of mosquitoes away. He also coldly told me that the Japanese killed all his friends. He helped build some of the jungle runways for the American planes to later land. He said that once the Americans came, things began to improve. My other grandfather was in the Royal Navy, in the Arctic convoys, delivering much needed supplies to the Russians in Murmansk. Winston Churchill described the convoys as the worst journey in the world. My grandfather initially put his life jacket on as trained to do, when one of the older sailors laughed and told him, "Don't worry about it, son, you'll freeze to death in under a minute anyway." They'd often have to chip away the thick ice on ships to prevent them capsizing. His ship was involved in numerous battles against larger, heavier armed German ships, as well as U-boats and planes. He told me how his ship had to use its last remaining torpedo to scuttle fellow crippled Royal Navy ship, HMS Edinburgh, which was carrying heaps of gold bullion from Stalin, to prevent it slipping into enemy hands. The gold was salvaged in the 1980s. He never said much, but he did talk once about throwing explosives of some kind in a river to catch fish. He was in the South Pacific as a Marine. I just remembered another one. He did not smoke, so he traded his cigarettes till he had enough for a typewriter, so he could type his letters to his wife and my mom, his daughter who was born after he went to war. My granduncle was part of a cleanup crew in Japan after the Battle of Leyte. So after all the fighting was done, they'd send his unit in to clear out the bodies of the fallen Japanese. He said that they would loot their bodies, take treasures like knives, swords, gold off the teeth, and then put their bodies on a giant landing craft, the kind that open up on a beach, and take them out to sea to dispose of them. He says he'll never forget watching the sharks just go to town on the dead. Haunts him to this day. Edit. This was in Philippines, not Japan. But it was a battle against the Japanese. Another edit. The intention was to give them a sea burial, since the Japanese left their dead upon retreat. It wasn't meant to desecrate the deceased further. My grandfather befriended a German family during the war. They would cook him meals, and the mother would wash his clothes. One day he loaded up a box with eggs, and used toilet paper, to make sure they didn't break. The next day there was a note in his laundry thanking him for the eggs, but an even bigger thank you for the toilet paper. They hadn't had any in years. I had an great uncle who was part of the occupying forces in Germany. He loved dogs, and purchased a full-blooded German Shepherd while overseas. He couldn't keep the dog with him, so he had a German family look after the dogs. Meat was hard to come by, so every week or so, my uncle would bring the family meat to feed the dog. It was only after getting the dog home my uncle discovered the dog absolutely loved sauerkraut, and didn't quite know what to do with the meat. It turns out the German family was taking the meat for the dog, and eating it themselves, and feeding the dog sauerkraut. My grandpa very rarely talked about it, but he was in the Pacific in WW2. He caught malaria, and was sent to a hospital ship to recover, and the Japanese sunk the ship. So he floated for like 10 hours clinging to the wreckage, with active malaria, before finally being rescued. And after all that, he re-enlisted and fought in the Korean War also. My grandfather joined up in 1943, when he turned 18 years old. He was stationed on a Pacific island, where he basically became a radar O'Reilly. His family were Mennonites, so he was a conscientious objector. He was a medic, clerical worker, cook, ditch digger, driver, and anything else that he was asked. Most of his time was spent cleaning up after everyone else and watching for air raids by the Japanese Air Force. Edit. My mom said that he watched the Japanese planes surrender on the US Missouri. Something sweet. My grandparents saved all their love letters sent back and forth during that time. They had just met and had fallen in love before his departure. So they carried on their romance and developed the relationship through beautifully written letters. Those letters expressed every emotion, from the realities and horrors of war to the abiding hope they'd be reunited safe and sound. They were married not long after grandfather's return. My grandfather lost his twin and his mother in a German bombing raid during the Blitz. He was 15 at the time and an alcoholic for most of his adult life. My great aunt told me she and her friends used to play in the bombed ruins of buildings near their home in West London. In retrospect, she realized how dangerous it was to be 3 stories up a crumbling building, but at the time, they didn't care at all. I feel bad for your gramps. Just imagine finding the body, someone who looks almost exactly like you, dead. I feel for you. My great-grandfather fought in the war and I never even knew about it until after he died. My grandmother said he came home, burned his uniform, and never talked about it, and she never asked. So many things made sense once I heard that. I knew that he struggled with alcoholism long before I was born, and my grandmother told him to get clean or she was leaving. He checked into a hospital and beat it. He would always get really mad if I was caught playing with his dog tags, which he kept. I knew he was in the army, but when I asked him what he did, all he said was he worked in Chicago. My grandmother didn't even tell me voluntarily. Several years after he died, I found his coin collection. I knew he had buffalo nickels, silver dollars, wheat pennies, etc. But there was a sock tied in a knot. In the sock was coins that I didn't know about. Money with swastikas on them, various coins from France and England, and even a couple from Russia that were really old. The real shocker was about 6 buttons from what I presume was an Nazi uniform, because yeah, no, swastikas. I asked grandma where these came from. She said probably from when he was in the war. I said, yeah, Chicago? That's when she dropped the bomb and said that he was gone in Europe for several years. Blew my freaking mind. My grandpa stormed the beaches at Pointe du Hoc in Normandy and lived to tell about it. Afterwards, when things calmed down and they had left France, he ran off for about a week to another country and had some fun. I went back to Pointe du Hoc with him for a Rangers reunion with my family several years ago. Now that was powerful. Standing in the same area with your grandpa and family where he stormed the beaches. My grandfather was a kid during WW2. He was born in 1931. He lived in Rugenwald, which used to be part of Germany. Today it's Poland, near the city of Szczecin. His dad had to fight for the Nazis, even though they were not particularly fond of their ideas. My grandfather had to go to Hitler Youth, where they would make all sorts of week-long trips through forests, learn how to handle guns, etc. He wasn't able to visit school for some time due to Germany losing the war. My great-grandfather obviously fought the Russians on the Eastern Front, but he was captured on a mission in Russia and kept as a war prisoner. When he had a really bad lung infection, and it was becoming clearer that Germany will be losing this war, he was released from prison and was able to spend 3 more days with his family before he passed. Then it was my grandfather's turn to try and earn some money, as he was the only son they had and his mum had to take care of his youngest sister. When Russia took over the whole area, they gave the Germans in the area the chance to leave for Western Germany. They provided one train and said whoever could get on there was free to go. The rest would stay there. My grandfather made sure that his family got on the train, but he didn't have any space himself, so he rode the train by standing on a metal bar thing that connects 2 train wagons for part of the journey. Luckily the train didn't run too fast. Once Hitler came to my grandfather's hometown earlier in the wartime, and he said everyone was so excited to see this man. People literally camped by the train tracks to await his train. Apparently he came by train for some reason. There's plenty more. Since my granddad basically had to flee his hometown and had never returned, he asked me and my dad, his son, to take him there a couple years back, since he would love to see how it's turned out. He was already over 80 years old. Of course we were happy to go, and we spent 9 days there. Some of it was quite emotional for him, and he told me many stories of his childhood. It was really interesting to hear his point of view, as he was a child for the most part. My great-grandfather never talked about the war until he had his stroke. We knew he had a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, but we didn't know how he got them. He was just a private, and he'd had enough of the military when the war was over. After the stroke, he seemed to loosen up. He laughed about sighting rifles in by shooting at chickens. He showed us pictures of him in front of the Eiffel Tower. Turns out he was occupation force. Ended up occupying an area near Berlin that became involved in the Battle of the Bulge. Apparently, while he was fighting, some sort of explosive blew off his buddy's leg, so Grandpa did what anyone else would do, and threw his buddy over his shoulder to get him to the med tent. This included running across a field in the line of sight of a German machine gun nest. He was shot in the leg and some more shrapnel ended up in his chest. Somehow, Grandpa and his buddy survived. We thought he was embellishing it, but the Bronze Star paperwork included a report that we found after he passed away. 2 higher-ups signed that the story was true, so I guess I have to believe it. He told us it wasn't that big of a deal, and that he didn't deserve all those medals for what he did. What a badass. R.I.P. Gramps. Grandpa and Grandma were out in Austria. Grandma was super pregnant with my aunt. They were stumbling through the forest when they met 5 Afro-American soldiers. Might have been the first time they've seen black people. One asked Grandpappy to come closer. No common language, just by using hand signs. They both thought that that's the end. They're done. It's scary to run into guys with big guns in the forest. Turns out, they got a bunch of eggs in exchange for some help at a nearby farm, and when they saw Grandma's big belly they thought she'll be needing the extra calories more than them, so they put it all into Pa's hat, and pointed on Grandma smiling. Best dudes ever. Got 2 stories. Grandmother on my mom's side told me this story. I remember first time when the Germans came into my village. I was outside playing with my cousin when my mom came and pulled us into the house and said, "SSH, be silent, the Germans are here." We stood by the window that had a little opening and saw how German soldiers walked on the road with tanks and knocked on people's doors and pulled some of them out. I saw my neighbor get shot on the spot. I was 5 years old and still remember it clearly. Grandmother on my dad's side, we lived just by the Danube, and I remember seeing the Germans on the other side of the stream. They started to board some small boats to cross the river. After some minimum they started to shell and shoot towards us, and I took my little brother in my arms and started to run for my life. I was 9 years old and my brother 4 inches. They didn't care how we looked like or not. They hated us because we are Slavs and not Germans. My grandfather was captured on Korregida at the start of the war, and was a POW to the Japanese for the duration. His being on the island could be considered somewhat fortunate, as he had previously been on the US Houston, which was sunk shortly before the island fortress fell. He talked about being on the Houston and being in Manila and his service after the war, but said almost nothing about his time as a POW. He did write a fairly sanitized account of his experience, but didn't like to actually talk about it. As a cattle rancher, he once had to call my uncles to put down a calf that wasn't going to live. He had to take a drive while my uncles shot the calf, because in his words, "I've seen enough killing and don't want to be around for any more of it." He at one point told my mom that he didn't hold any ill will against the Japanese people, but if he ever saw one specific guard on the streets he would kill him without hesitation. At one point in the war he was moved to Japan to be used as slave labor in the coal mines. His civilian mine foreman was kinder than most people and saved his life after a near fatal accident. In the days immediately after the war ended, the POWs were issued Red Cross boxes and allowed to roam the city as they pleased. My grandpa ran into his former foreman whose family was now starving due to the severe food shortages. My grandpa spent the next few weeks bringing the Japanese family food from this Red Cross packages and continued to mail them care packages after he was returned home. Having sold everything else of value, the foreman gave him their only remaining possession in thanks, a traditional wedding kimono that had been in the family for generations. The 2 men remained lifelong friends, and in the early 2000s, after both men had passed, my family flew to Japan to return the kimono to his widow and sons. It was an extremely emotional visit for both sides. My grandpa had a hard life growing up and saw the Navy as a source of stability, enlisting before the start of the war. He loved the sense of order and camaraderie being in the service gave him, and stayed until retirement shortly before Vietnam got going in earnest. His time as a POW was too horrific to talk about this, so for most of my life there was a hole in his stories between 1942 and 1945. The things I've found out about the camps he was in are truly horrific. The tortures the men endured, and the fact that any of them survived at all is amazing. One of the stories he did write about concerned his transport to the Japanese mainland. The Japanese needed more manpower and promised better conditions and better food to anyone who volunteered to go back to the home islands. The POWs were packed into the transport ship's hold so tightly that they couldn't lay down. They had to sit with their legs in a V-asta crotch to fit everyone without standing. There was only one small door open to the deck and the men cycled out who was closest to it, based on who passed out from the heat and stale air. The transport ship was part of a convoy, but had no markings indicating that it was carrying POWs. During the night, American submarines ambushed the convoy. The Japanese quickly shut and latched the only door after telling the POWs that if the Americans sunk the ship, they were going down with it. For the rest of the night and several nights after, the men sat in the dark stifling heat and listened to ships exploding around them, never knowing if they were next. When the guards would open the door in the morning, the air was so foul it looked like smoke. There were no bathrooms, so the men were sitting in their own filth with the corpses of the men who died during the night leaning against them. That story was tame enough that he thought he could share it. He never talked about the really bad stuff that happened. Edit. I just remembered another more light-hearted story he told. When he was still in a camp in the Philippines, a couple of the guards decided that they wanted to try to learn a little English. The POW's mind began strong, patting their biceps and flexing while saying "son of a bitch" and pointing to the guards. For the next day, 2 of the guards were walking camp around proudly telling all the POWs they saw "I son of bitch." The prisoners caught a beating for it when the guards found out what they had been saying, but from the way he told the story, it was worth it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Serious people who have had somebody die for you, what is your story? My brother jumped in front of his wife when a maniac was trying to run them over. My brother was killed on the 15th of November 2015 in Eugene, Oregon, while on a weekend getaway. He and his wife had just finished breakfast and were walking back to their car to go back to the place they were staying. As they were crossing the road, a man in a Toyota Highlander, who had just beat his parents with a baseball bat, killing the father and permanently injuring his mother, decided to drive into my brother and his wife at full speed. According to the police reconstruction and witnesses, my brother put his body in front of his wife's and took the brunt of the impact. He was killed instantly, and my brother's body slammed into his wife, breaking nearly all her bones on the left side of her body. She lived. R.I.P. Mark J. Sanford. A truly amazing man, brother, friend, son, stepfather and husband. I'm late to the party, so many won't see this, but I wanted to put this out there. Obvious throwaway because people know my personal account, and I'm not ready to talk about it with most people. Most details are intentionally made ambiguous. The irony that I'm posting it here for everyone is not lost on me. I was in Afghanistan in 2011, working in humanitarian assistance / human terrain analysis. I was working in the southern part of a city in the southeast of the country, working in various villages / communities over the course of a few weeks. I have Middle Eastern / Southwest Asian features, so the Afghans took a liking to me. I got to know one village community particularly well, to the point that one of the younger boys, about 13, would always walk with me holding my hand, a sign of friendship in their culture. We'd talk about life in America, what his life was like in his Afghanistan, what he wanted to be when he grew up, basic stuff, nothing serious. I left that community to work in other parts of the region for a little, while with the intention of coming back for one more visit before I went back to HQ to write reports and shit. So I go back for that one visit to find the community cold to me, which is very unusual in Pashtunwali. Pashtuns is the ethnicity of the people in the area. Pashtunwali is like their ethnic code of conduct. As we're leaving the area, we found the body of the kid that was hanging out with me. He was executed by gunshot and left to rot in a ditch. He didn't die for me in the sense that he sacrificed himself for my sake. Rather, he died for being my friend. The people of that community refused to speak to any NATO forces after that. Not me personally, but it did affect me. For those who live in the US, you may have heard about this, as it made national news. I used to work at an elementary school, and one day during dismissal time, one of the parked school buses suddenly jumped the curb towards a group of children. The principal was not too far behind them, and pushed them out of the way just in time, before the bus hit her, and killed her instantly. I was there when it happened. That was the bravest and most selfless thing I have ever seen anyone do, and proved her character in how passionate she was with working with children. When I was 7 years old, my mother and I got into a car accident. I was asleep in the front seat wearing no seatbelt. She saw the oncoming car approaching and threw herself on top of me, saving me from flying through the windshield, but killing her instantly. I think about her every day, and I want to live to tell her legacy. Her name was Jennifer Lee. Rwandan genocide survivor here. I lost my dad during the Rwandan genocide when I was 4 years old. He died protecting my sister, my mother, and me. The genocide was basically between two tribes, Hutus and Tutsis. My parents were each from different tribes. To make a long story short, both tribes were willing to take all of us in, but the non-verbal agreement was that the parent that wasn't from the appropriate tribe would be dealt with. Not wanting my mom to die, my dad chose to bring us to her tribe's side of the conflict, thus sealing his own death in the process. He was taken to some woods somewhere, and he had his head chopped off. What always gets to me is my mom telling me how he silently cried as he was taken away. My grandfather at the time was 94 years old. My 4-year-old daughter got the flu, which she then gave to me. I was homesick with my daughter, and I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone my daughter. My grandfather took care of the both of us. I remember waking up to him covering me with a blanket, like when I was a child. He ended up getting the flu from us, and his respiratory system couldn't take it. He passed because he took care of me and my daughter, and it makes me cry every time I remember that. I tried to shorten this as best I could, but it's still crazy long, I'm sorry. October 13th, 2011, my aunt and uncle invited me to come down with them for a wedding party they were having at their house in Logan for one of their friends. I accepted, packed my stuff to stay for a weekend, and got into their car. We were just chatting while driving through Logan Canyon from my house to theirs. It was nice, because I hadn't really talked to them since I moved up there. Well, all of a sudden I hear my aunt say, "Steve, Steve." I look up and see a red truck right in front of us. It hits and I black out. I wake up in a lot of pain and everything smelt weird, and I couldn't talk. My aunt gets out of the car and is panicking and asking if my uncle and I are okay, which I'm still surprised that she could to this day, because she had a broken disc in her back. My uncle had died on impact. I learned later that he turned the car just in time to take the full brunt of everything. Something that still makes me very uncomfortable is recalling this event. I can still clearly remember him breathing, but it was gurgling, and like he was trying to breathe. Apparently his brain had split in two or something. I don't know if that's a thing that can happen. I just remember being told that. I get upset thinking about it. I feel like I heard him dying. Everyone thought I walked out of there okay until a few days later my intestines burst, because a portion of them had been killed. Though I walked out of the car with broken glasses and a bruised arm, somehow no broken bones. I don't know if this information will make you feel better or worse, but if it helps you understand what was happening to your uncle, yes, you were hearing him die. It sounds like he may have been doing agonal breathing, not to be confused with any kind of agony. He wasn't awake or aware of what had happened to him or felt anything. The breathing noises he was making wasn't really breathing at all. His brain was responding to the lack of oxygen it was receiving, because his heart had stopped. It's a very natural thing that happens when someone is dying suddenly, and it's awful you had listened to it happen to someone you know and love, and not know what exactly was happening to him. From experience, I know how terrifying it sounds, especially when you think they are breathing and something can be done to help them. There was nothing anyone could have done to prevent him from dying, and he was very brave to have maneuvered the car the way he did. I hope you can find some peace about what happened. Thank you for the information about this. I'd never really tried looking it up, but it does help knowing he didn't feel any of it. I've posted this on other threads before, but it's a story about my dad. It was winter time. When I was 10, my father and I were walking across the ice covering the canal across from his house. I believe we were going for lunch. Before I realized what was going on, the ice broke from under us, and after some time of struggling to stay afloat, someone had finally noticed us in the water, encircled with ice. The guy threw an extension cord out to us. My dad told me to grab hold of it, and he pushed hard on me to get me up on the ice, so the guy could pull me to shore. As he pushed up on me, I looked back to see his face disappear under the water. That was the last time I ever saw him. I have been suicidal for a couple of months. When I was 21, I guess it's always been there, but some things in my life triggered it. I knew I didn't want to die, but something inside me was telling me it's the right choice and that no one really wanted me in their life. So I started to plan my suicide, without anyone knowing. Around that time, my sister-in-law got sick, and passed away right on New Year's Eve, and suddenly I got 2 small children to care for. At first, I didn't know what to do. My plans were basically changed super fast. I didn't have time to think on what just happened. But these children changed me. I started to see that yes, I'm worth something, and needed, and nothing makes me cry so much than thinking of dying and leaving these kids with more death in their life. I don't know if it counts or not, but I was basically saved by these kids and their mom. Sorry, this is another not me, but when we were 7 my best friend's mom was at a bar not far from where we grew up. I guess a guy there was getting really rowdy and the management asked him to leave. As he was being kicked out he drunkenly yelled something along the lines of "I'll come back and kill every person in this place." I don't think anyone took him seriously, but later that night he returned with a gun and opened fire on the people in the bar. Her mom ushered some of her friends into the kitchen to hide. She got them all into a pantry, but he came in and caught them. He shot her in the head and moved on to the rest of the bar. She died protecting her friends. A few weeks later, at a different bar in a different state, my friend's dad was shot and killed also. She was orphaned at 7 years old and was then raised by her grandmother. We don't talk about it very often, but on holidays like Mother or Father's Day I know I need to check in on her. My brother died for me 13 years ago yesterday. We were alone at a beach in Mexico, no lifeguards, while our dad was taking care of some business. The water had been rough the day before, but my brother wanted to take a swim, so we went in anyway. Messing around in the water with one of those disposable underwater cameras, we got distracted and didn't realize how far we'd been pulled out. Suddenly we realized we were in a rip current and how big the waves around us were. Tried to swim back, but couldn't, and at this point I'm panicking, yelling for help, and telling my brother I don't want to die. He says I won't, stays with me, and yells for help. Someone at one of the beachside restaurants finally notices us and jumps into the water with a boogie board. They swim up to us and tell us to hang on to the board. My brother and I are holding hands in the board together. One wave later, and we are ripped apart. That was the last time I saw him. I live for him every day. He was and is my best friend. My mom died giving birth to me. I didn't find out about the circumstances of her death until I was 7 and my aunt said something about it to me. It messed me up for a while. I often wonder what my life would have been like if she was around. I had very little female influence in my life. I was raised by my dad and 5 brothers. Dad just treated me like one of the boys, so I grew up working on cars and motorcycles. My dad has never dated anyone since. That sometimes makes me sad too. I look at all the joy my husband brings into my life and want that for him, but I think he is just done with that part of his life. My brothers will sometimes tell stories about her. It's really the only way I know anything about her. There are some pictures around too. People tell me I look just like her and have the same attitude. I just have to take their word for it. I'm older now than she ever was. I look at all the things going on in my life and I feel incredibly guilty for taking that away from her. It makes me want to live my life in a way that I think would make her proud. My father's best friend growing up passed away before I was born, but in an absolutely heroic manner. My parents and godfather, Glenn, were rafting along the Colorado River in the early 90s. Following a large section of rapids, they decided to take a break along the shore. Shortly after, they heard screams for help from upstream, closer to the rapids. A young boy had fallen out of a raft without a life jacket on. Glenn rushed up the shore with his life jacket and jumped in the white water, swimming towards the boy. He was able to take his own life jacket off, attach it to the boy, and fasten it before he was pulled down by the current. My parents were quite distraught for some time after. They hold Glenn in a different light in their minds and decided to give me, their first son, a part of him. My middle name is Glenn. I'm very proud to have had someone like that as a direct influence on my life. We sold drugs, and let's call him Jay. I got into it to help him out, but it was my choice all the way. We were just kids. I was 15. On our days off, we posted up outside a liquor store and just hung out, talked about whatever came to mind. Maybe we had some customers pass by, put some work in, but that wasn't why we hung out there. It was quiet, nobody bothered us much, and we got to just chill. Apparently he had a reputation I wasn't aware of with some other crew, because one day I saw a car around the corner after sunset with no lights on. They didn't stop, but slowed down around the store, and I thought back, quote, alright, sketchy customer, get the bags ready. Then the window came down, and I saw the barrel stick out. I froze, but Jay was quick, got in front of me, and brought me down, while I just heard 2 shots, and then the car speeding away. I got grazed, but he got hit in his midsection, and in the head. He was a lot taller than me, so the headshot missed me completely. He didn't die immediately. I held him, and called 911. I don't remember talking to the operator. I just remember looking at him, and being able to tell the second he died. It really is a lights out moment, where they just aren't there anymore. I've recently learned that the name for what I did after that was called back, quote, cleaning, moaning or screaming in response to someone's death. I just yelled and yelled, cried, and screamed. It's been 12 years, and I'm fine now, but I keep his memory with me and realize that we put ourselves in that danger, so I take more responsibility for the situations I put myself and my loved ones in. Edit. This is my most popular post. I do appreciate the well wishes and condolences. To be politely brief, thank you all. He was a stranger. His death saved me and 3 others. The circumstance surrounding his death will never be completely known, as mistakes were made during his medical care. At the time of his death, I had already been on an artificial heart for 11 months, and was probably about 2 weeks from death myself. It had been a 3-year journey for me and my family. Getting listed for transplant and then sitting on that list was grueling. I was simply done. I received his heart on the 11th of January 14. Although the recovery still goes on, I'm alive and enjoying my life. His name was Futim, and I now know his family. At the start of the year my grandparents came home from work to get changed before dinner and found my uncle collapsed on the floor. He was declared brain dead half an hour later, and they were asked about organ donation. He was kept on life support for 3 days while the paperwork was sorted and the recipients were prepared. The second his life support was off and his body accepted that it was dead, he was whisked off to go and save lives. He never had children, but my nan seems a little happier knowing his death helped others and that at least part of her son is out there walking around, even if she hasn't brought herself to unbox his urn yet. Not the typical altruistic life-saving event, but I'll go on. I'm an identical triplet. We started out as quadruplets, but the fourth little homie took one for the team as he stopped developing sometime during my mother's pregnancy. This allowed the remaining clones to develop healthy and well, utilizing the nutrients that would have been split by 4 down to 3. Pouring one out for you, maximum. Edit. There are a lot of triplets on Reddit. My mother's boyfriend died protecting her and her mother from being kidnapped in a mall parking lot back in the 80s. It was at night and they were leaving the mall when 2 men came up and attempted to kidnap them. My mother's boyfriend got in between them and was shot point blank in the head and died instantly. The men were caught and jailed, but I'm pretty sure they are out now. My mom and the mother of the man killed sued the mall and won because there was no lighting in the parking lot and the overall general safety of the mall was questionable before the incident. After the lawsuit, lights were installed in the parking lot for better visibility. It really affected my mom and shaped her into the person she is today, unfortunately for the worse. She has struggled with many things after the incident and was never the same. She does not feel comfortable in many situations and does not dream. She said that she had such bad nightmares afterwards that she eventually just stopped dreaming altogether. My mother doesn't like to talk about it much. From what I have been told was that she will never forget what a brain looks like. The woman who was the mother of the deceased went on to become a relative to my family regardless of her not actually being blood related. The man was her only son, so she did not have much left. She is my grandma and has helped my family out countless ways throughout the years and I love her very much. My mother became her daughter and us her grandkids. My mom went on to marry a good friend of her deceased boyfriend and that is how my siblings and I came to be. Without him sacrificing himself for my mom, I would not be here today. He died a hero and I'm thankful for his sacrifice. Thank you, Ricky. Aged 11 I went to visit my sister unannounced. She didn't want me to come in, but I was upset. So she looked after me. I knew she had problems and was addicted to a drug, but I was 11. I didn't understand what a prostitute was. While I was round, the man, her pimp, started shouting at the door for her to let him in and she told me to hide in the cupboard. I did. He came in and told her to fuck him. She refused because she knew I was in the cupboard. This escalated and then he raped her and stabbed her 17 times. He left and I stayed silent in the cupboard for 7 hours afraid to come out. I was found by her housemate who was also a working girl. My father. I was assaulted when I was 9. He confronted the man that did it, beat his ass. Man came back and shot him in the head. My mother has hated me ever since, so I lost 2 parents in one day. It has affected me in the sense that I'm hypervigilant in protecting my son. I have read the thread to this and would like to make something clear. I don't blame my mother because I understand some things about trauma. I do appreciate the kind words some have offered. I'm really late to this, so this will probably be ignored, but whatever, I can answer this. When I was 16 it was just me and my dad. My mum had passed away a few years before, so my dad was raising a teenage daughter alone while trying to run a business that his heart wasn't in. My mum wanted the business mainly. One night my dad tells me that he needs to go meet a friend and that he'd be home late. This was fairly normal, so I didn't really think much of it. Off he went. That night I was woken at 4 AM to 2 police officers at the door. They sit me down and tell me that my dad's car had been found parked beside a bridge and a male body was on the road below the bridge. They told me that my dad had committed suicide. He left a note solely addressed to me that essentially vaguely said he had got involved in something dodgy and the other people had threatened to hurt me to get back at him. The only way he felt he could protect me was to take himself out of the picture. This was 8 years ago now, and I still have no idea what he was involved in or what went down. The last line of the note really stuck with me. It said, "Please make something of your life." I haven't. I've done my absolute best since that day and have managed to graduate uni and get myself a good job with well above average pay for my age. I've met an amazing guy, and I'm truly happy. I obviously miss my dad every day, but he did push me to become who I'm now, and I really owe him for that. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Reddit. What's the funniest thing that a random stranger said to you that made you die laughing inside? Okay, the laughter was not entirely inside, but years ago on the subway in New York, a crazy dude walks on the train and screams at everyone you're all going to hell, and then steps off as the doors close. Total silence as the weirdness of the moment settles in. Then, without missing a beat, guy across from me goes, "Shoot, I thought this train was going to Harlem." Entire subway car of cynical New Yorkers bursts out laughing. I was helping a customer pick out a new bra, and she said she wanted her breasts to be lifted. She said, "My boobs are so saggy that, if my nipples were eyeballs, I'd be able to see if my shoes were untied." I really tried my best to remain professional, but I couldn't stop laughing lol. Was leaving Walmart and the 80-ish-year-old greeter says thanks for shopping at Dollar Tree. I worked at Dollar General for a month, my first job, when I was 18, and my manager told me that I needed to start greeting every customer that walked through the doors, because me at the register was the first thing that they saw when they walked in. I was super shy and socially awkward, still am, and I had never greeted people like that before, but regardless of that, I tried doing what was requested of me. However, I had recently been to a Goodwill, and I had been greeted there by someone who said, "Hi, welcome to Goodwill." So, the first customer I saw walk through the door is this man in his 40s with a scraggly beard and an old baseball cap. Without hesitation and with all of the confidence I could possibly muster, I smile at him and say, "Hi, welcome to Goodwill." The man gave me the strangest look, and I could feel my face turn beet red. From that point on, I didn't say crap to anyone at DG, unless they were at the register. I'm still scarred to this day. Movie just ended. Me and my dad joined the mad rush to the bathrooms. Urinals are packed. It's our turn, we doing our business. Suddenly someone rips a hug fart. Lol, it's pretty funny, but we all have manners. Still peeing. Suddenly this dude proclaims, "It was NEEEE," and runs out the door. Whole bathroom erupts in laughter. I was at DFW airport a few months ago. Bathroom is full of people, so there's like 15 dudes in this giant bathroom waiting for a urinal. Guy at one of the urinals in a super nice suit rips a pretty gnarly one, but it sounded like he might have needed a change of underwear. You could cut the tension with a knife. Dude looks over his shoulder slightly and says, "Freaking relax, I'm a professional." Everyone had a good laugh over that one. I must have been about 10 or 11. I sat down on a bench next to an old guy to sort my shoe out. I took my shoe off, and he just turns to me and says, "Are they golfing socks?" I look at him with a completely blank look on my face thinking WTF. As I looked away he just said, "There's a hole in one." A few years ago I let my friend cut my hair. It did not go well. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and was walking through South Philly when I passed two strangers in the middle of a conversation. As I pass, one of them says to the other, "Hold up, I gotta talk to this guy." He proceeds to shout to me, "Ayo, your hair looks like crap. Come over here." I was amused, partially because of his bluntness and partially because he wasn't wrong. I was curious, so I walked over to him. He says, "Look, a buddy of mine owns a barber shop 2 blocks away. Here's his business card. I'll write my name on there. If you mention that I sent you, he'll give you a good deal." Bruh, but seriously, take care of that crap. I never ended up going to his friend's shop, but I frequently use this story as the perfect example of Philly culture. Rude, blunt and in your face, yet somehow coming from a place of genuine care. Plus, it's freaking hilarious. May of 2000. Passing through Norwood, Louisiana with a friend. At around 2 in the afternoon we stopped to gas up / grab some snacks at the most podunk gas station known to man. A young man, extremely agitated, comes in with frustrated gestures and angrily shouts / gestures at the cashier with an accent that is beyond region, beyond stereotyping, beyond anything I have heard before. Where da goddamn Wally Melons at the top of lungs, approaching hysteria and tears. This reminds me of the time I asked for directions in South Georgia, and it went like this. Go down there, and take a left. Us, then go past the gas station. Us, okay. Then yawn. Us, yawn. Yeah. Then yawn. Took us forever to realize she was saying then you're on your own. I work in retail, and I'm not sure why, but this had me dying for a while. I still laugh when I think about it. Me, how you doing today, sir? Customer, yep. And he went on his way. Once I was walking into class and my teacher told me hey, but I thought he asked how I was doing, so the conversation actually went, teacher, hey, me, I'm good. An old man on the street with a big jack-o'-lantern grin on his face and two chihuahuas under each arm loudly proclaiming to no one in particular, I used to carry grenades. Now I carry dogs. The college I attend frequently has local elementary and middle school kids on tours, especially on Fridays. One particular Friday I was in line for the cafeteria when a group of kids came walking by with a tour guide. One kinda chubby little dude looked a bit uncomfortable. He was biting his lip a little and sweating. This part of the tour is usually when they have a bathroom break, and clearly Buddy needed to go. At this point I should note that the bathrooms are visible from where we are standing. But the tour guide, a fellow student of mine, didn't seem to notice. She just kept going on and on, talking about the history of the building. I watched this kid go from nervous, to deeply anxious, to visibly clenching over a span of about 3 minutes. He's staring at the stick-figure dude on the men's bathroom sign, as if it was the risen Christ. Miss Tour Guide takes a break in her spiel. I figure she's done. The next words out of her mouth will be wants to free this boy from the purgatory that is having to use the bathroom on a school trip. It'll be over. He'll be free. What followed, instead, was this. So in 1995, a professor named ABC, Kalamazoo, move lady, I'm gonna crap my ass. He ran past her to the bathroom, and presumably destroyed it. Poor guy. Had the entire line in tears with laughter though. Edit, I'm not from Kalamazoo, and Professor Albert Batch Cornelius Kalamazoo isn't real. Sorry to crush y'all's dreams. But he does live, through all of our hearts. Also thanks for all the gold, or whatever. It feels weird to get such attention, however fleeting, for just wanting some chicken tenders, and witnessing a kid almost poop himself. Worked at a smoke shop that sold electronic cigarettes years ago. A customer came in complaining that the new flavor made her pee smell funny. I couldn't keep a straight face when I said I wasn't sure if that was related. Then she says, oh, well it could be an STD or something I guess. Thanks. And walked out. Something I overheard as two kids walked past our caravan park site. A rumbling boom of distant thunder. Kid 1, I like thunder. It sounds like a 200-year-old dog who's retired and helps old people who are blind to get around. Kid 2, silence. Kid 1, you know. Kid 2, but why is it retired? Kid 1, because it's old. Kid 2, but it's still helping blind people. Kid 1, silence. I was at a 50th wedding anniversary party and there were lots of elderly people in attendance. An old man was standing next to me and said it looks like a freaking graveyard in here. I literally spit my beer out. We were outdoors. The kicker was the guy was close to the same age as everyone else. I was at a salon with my grandma and there were mirrors all around at different angles. She turned around, looked confused, and just said oh shoot that's me. Turns out she saw herself from the back in one of the mirrors and thought there was an old lady behind her. I was working at Best Buy and had a customer that was 92. He asked the difference between two towers that were about $100 difference in price. I told him that for what he was going to use it for, he said ML and Facebook, that they would both work fine, and that if anything the nicer one might last a bit longer. He said last longer? Man I'm 92. I don't even buy green bananas. Funniest thing I've ever heard. Watched a guy walking to class at my college years ago saying, get the frick out of my way to a pigeon standing in his path. The pigeon quickly waddled off to the side. I was riding the T-Subway home one night with a Spike's Junkyard sandwich of the buffalo chicken variety. A clearly drunk guy with his girlfriend said to me are you going to face frick that sandwich? To which I replied yes. He then turned to his girlfriend and said babe let's get some buffalo chicken. Years ago when queuing up for movie tickets with my family, the attendant asked the ages of our 4 kids to see if they could all get children price tickets. I announced their ages, 7, 9, 11, and 13. Without missing a beat, the stranger behind us declared, that's an odd group. They're leaving out next year. First day in basic training. All hell had broken loose. It was just screaming and confusion. I had an instructor come up to me with another new kid in tow and yell trainee, do you know where the latrine is? I want you to escort this trainee to the latrine, so he can go sick himself in the proper facilities. I didn't know where they were, but figured I'd give it my best shot. So myself and this kid walk outside. I look over at him and he's greenish, kind of whimper crying, and hunched over. We take 2 steps outside when he pops. Projectile vomit all over the ground. Huge mess. I look up and see an even bigger scarier instructor rounding the corner about 15 feet in front of us. He walks up, looks the kid in the eye, and with an icy hatred, says, "What the frick did you just do to my ground? Do you really hate my ground so much you'd sick yourself on it? I want you to apologize to my ground and then clean yourself up." I nearly lost it. The kid whimpered out a "sorry I puked on you" ground, and we were on our way. In college, this one girl in the front of the room chimes in on something and mentioned that her eyes change color during the summer every year from blue to green. This black dude in the back of the class whispers to his friend, "Yeah bitch," and I turn white in winter. I had to remove myself immediately before I made a scene from laughing so hard. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Welcome. These stories today come from r/today I fricked up. Enjoy. Today I fricked up by finding a flash drive and looking what was on it. I found a flash drive in my home and was curious as to what was on it. I put it in the computer and find folders full of family pictures and a video. It was blurred in the thumbnail, so of course I have to play it. It all happened so fast. I see a wiener, a hard, throbbing wiener, staring me right in the eye, and then it's coming. And after the last bit of cum drops, the camera gets aimed downward, and I see my dad's shoes in the tile in our bathroom. I just watched my dad shoot his freaking load all over the bathroom tile. This dude filmed himself coming in the bathroom. He moved out a long time ago and obviously forgot that this flash drive was here. I'm not going to give it back. I'm not going to assert dominance and return the favor. I'm going to burn it with freaking fire. TLDR, I met my siblings today. Edit. With all the attention this is getting, I'd like to turn this frick up into something positive. Please consider donating to Prevent Child Abuse America. Today I fricked up by assuming the office was empty. This happened yesterday. I'm lactose and fructose intolerant, which basically means that my body can't handle these types of food very well, so generally I try to avoid such foods. But you gotta give yourself a treat once in a while, don't you? So the night leading to yesterday I had large appetite and decided to grind me a giant bowl of oatmeal with milk and slices of banana, and in the morning I still felt great. That changed drastically on the way to work though, as I realized I was bloating up like a balloon. Being a nice guy, I don't fart in public with other passengers near, so by the time I arrive at work, I feel like a cramping zeppelin. But fate was on my side as my whole team, except me, was scheduled for a meeting, and oh my did I anticipate the alone time to get at least some relief. On a side note, for those of you who think why doesn't he go to the bathroom and farts there or take a dump, it doesn't work like that for me. Building up massive amounts of gas doesn't mean I need to take a crap, and if I need to fart, that urge is most likely gone by the time I reach the bathroom, and even if I made it in time, one fart is just the tip of the iceberg. So finally everyone left the office and I decided to let a little one go, just to estimate the impact of the forbidden food, and what seemed not so bad the first 4 seconds hit me like unimaginable horror. Toxic mustard gas refinery seemed like an appropriate label for my bum. I decided to get as many out in a short amount of time, having enough time to open the windows and get rid of the evidence of my seemingly rotting insides before my colleagues came back. As I was sitting there in shame, contaminating the air around me, I hear steps of high heels approaching. Okay, it's my female boss, but she shouldn't have any business visiting me in my office, so I should be safe. Wait, these aren't just steps of one woman, it must be two. Then it hit me. Today our new female colleague is going to be introduced to our team. As I hear them chatting and getting closer, I desperately try to wave the smell away and pressed my butt on the chair to keep the last bomb from releasing its full nuclear power, praying they will notice the office is empty and don't even get to my room. Of course I was wrong. They entered the office of my team and approached me while smiling. I start to sweat, my heart is pounding, I'm screwed, and as I have to stand up to shake her hand, the invisible horror spreads and their smile disappears in a split second. My boss even holds her nose and asks, "What on earth is that smell?" By that time my life is obviously over. I made some comment like it must have been something from outside, but I hadn't opened the windows yet. They saw through my lie right away. She introduced herself quickly, and they both literally fled, leaving me behind full of shame, guilt and embarrassment. I really wanted to go back in time so desperately. TLDR, assumed the office was empty, released the most foul farts humanity has ever faced, only to have my female boss introducing my new female colleague to me, while the stench was at its peak. Edit, not sure if this post blowing up like my bowels is compassion or mocking. Edit 2, thanks for all the kind/funny replies and the silver and gold. We'll do some research on what I can do with that right away. Here's some more information. I love oatmeal with milk and banana since I was a child. I could eat that 3 times a day. For those of you wondering why oatmeal is a treat for me, lactose-free milk/pills/enzymes haven't worked for me yet. There were no consequences. Boss and colleague today acted like it never happened. Telling them the truth would have been the better choice, but I was panicking. Yes, I could have used oat milk or water, but lately small amounts of milk products seem to have been handled fine by my body, so I thought I was ready/healed. Today I fricked up by exposing myself to my wife's friend. This happened on Friday, and I'm just now able to relive it without experiencing Tourette-like outbursts of random noises and profanity from my extreme discomfort from the embarrassment. I'm sitting on the toilet in the downstairs bathroom, which is right by the front door of our house. I have the door mostly closed, but it's not latched. Doorbell rings. My wife answers it. It's her friend Jen. Jen comes in the house. I should mention that Jen is a friend/neighbor we've known for just under a year, and I don't really know her that well, which, for me, makes this worse. I'm just finishing up, getting ready to wipe. I pull on the first piece of toilet paper, and as the toilet paper unrolls, this big and very fast spider comes running from behind the roll, brushing against my hand. Instinctively, I jump up and away from this spider. As I do this, the door to the bathroom opens. There's Jen. We both scream, me because my fight or flight, in this case flight, response automatically kicks in from my lizard brain, thinking I'm getting attacked by the spider, and Jen seeing her friend's husband with his pants and underwear down between his legs leaping toward her screaming. A lot of apologies and light uncomfortable laughter afterwards, and I haven't slept well since. TL. Dr. Tofu by exposing myself to my wife's friend when I jumped from a spider while sitting on the toilet, right when my wife's friend walked into the bathroom. Edit. Wow, my first silver and first gold. Thanks. I had to stop reading these for a while today. I tend to keep replaying embarrassing things over and over. My random noise Tourette's started acting up. Tonight is definitely an ambient night. Oh man, that's a tough one to recover from. Was it at its smallest? Oh yeah, plus it was cold in the morning. You're making me shudder again with the memory. More of a ding and a dong. Huh. Today I fricked up by eating an insane amount of extremely potent psychedelic mushrooms. This is obviously the day after, because I couldn't write this during the experience, but here goes. I currently am staying in a country where psychedelic mushrooms are completely legal to possess and consume. I obtained 1 ounce of dried extremely potent mushrooms. Because I'm stupid and inexperienced, I didn't use a scale. I had only done them twice before. I sat down and just started popping them like chips for around 20 minutes. I ate so many that I was already beginning to trip heavily when I got up to put them away, and had trouble doing so. I estimate that I ate around 10 grams, because the bag was around 2/3 full afterward, which is insane considering it was an ounce. For reference, a normal dose is 3.5 dried grams, with 3.5 being rather intense. The next few minutes consisted of me laughing hysterically. The hallucinations were obviously getting more and more intense. I was breathing heavily, and likely hyperventilating, because breathing felt insanely good. I listened to music for a few minutes, and then went to sit back on my bed. This is where things get bad. I quickly started losing my concept of reality, all while breathing, and laughing heavily still. Closing my eyes would nearly take me to another dimension, and I knew I fricked up. One of the last things I remember was sticking my hands in my mouth like a maniac. It didn't even feel like I was doing it. Then I remember a split frame of me falling off my bed. Then I passed out. What I experienced next can only be described as an unconscious stupor accompanied by extreme hallucinations. While I was unconscious, I was watching entities breaking apart from each other. They also would communicate with me. They somehow told me that they could only exist in the environment they were in. I had no knowledge of my existence, reality, memories, or anything other than what I was experiencing. I believe this is usually called ego death. This went on for hours. But it gets worse. I come back to consciousness slowly. I have absolutely no idea what is going on, or what my existence is. I'm under my freaking bed. My friend is in my room. He heard me screaming at the top of my lungs for a very long time. He said that I was making random noises, and saying random words like whoa, among other things. He tries to talk to me, but I didn't understand a word he was saying at the time. I'm still laying partially under my bed. He explains to me that I took way too much. I keep asking him to explain again. To be honest, I was so mentally screwed that it felt like I had a stroke. I look over and realize that I knocked some sodas over that were on my floor, and they spilled all over the floor across the room to the power strips that my computers and electronics were plugged in. My friend explains to me that I've been screaming so loud that he thinks the police might be called. He also told me that I was moaning for a while and that our other friend thought that I was watching porn. I keep asking him to explain the situation over and over because I could hear the words he was saying, but my brain could not process the meaning of them. It was a really scary feeling. He leaves for a minute while I pace around my room asking myself what is happening. I realized that I had to urinate, but couldn't make it to the bathroom. I grabbed a soda can and intoxicatedly tried to urinate in it. I missed and urinated all over my freaking floor. Luckily it isn't carpet, but frick. The amount of disappointment and confusion running through my mind is inexplicable at this point. I can't describe the feeling of not knowing what is going on. The feeling of waking up from the unconscious hallucinations and still not knowing what was going on was haunting, and it was worse with urine all over my floor. My friend comes back a little later and brings me a new pair of underwear. After he sees what I did, I slowly begin coming back to reality over the course of an hour or two, clean up my piss and spilled soda, and take a shower. Then I went to sleep. I woke up today completely fine, but for frick's sake did I fuck up. People, never underestimate psychedelics. Learn from my mistake. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. Divers and people who spend a lot of time underwater, what's the creepiest, most unexplainable thing you've seen while in the depths? Not unexplainable, but gave me a bit of a fright. I worked as a commercial diver for about 7 years in the UK, and also some work in Europe. I was working in Orkney, north of Scotland, on the fish farms. One time I swam down one of the bigger nets off Rousay, and it was very dark, very overgrown, and I could see some weird shapes lying in the dead man's sock as I descended. There were a few more dead fish than usual, maybe 100 or so, but underneath them were lying 3 dead seals. Big ones. It was hard to make out because they were covered in fish, but one of the seals had a big fucking chunk of it missing. And that's when I looked up and saw a 4-foot tear in the side of the net. Fuck that. I was only a newbie at this point. Fish farm work is generally the best way to start a diving career. Doesn't pay the best, but you get plenty of minutes logged, which helps for experience. I told the supervisor, who said get out straight away. They sent one of the more experienced lads in after me, and he fixed the whole sharpish and then rigged the seals up to be lifted out. Turns out the seals had been killed by orca and somehow got through the net in a panic. Orca are quite common up in Orkney and are the only animal we were told you had to get out the water for if seen. Only one of the seals had a bite mark. The other 2 got caught in the net. Not supernatural or anything, but I remember a significant shiver running down my spine that day. Edit. Whoa. More responses than I've ever had on a post. To answer the question about why orcas, I was told by one of the marine environment lads who used to regularly come out on the boats with us that it's a precautionary thing. Wearing black neoprene and fins, you may be mistaken for a seal and become breakfast. To be fair, it's a precaution I was very happy to go along with. We don't get great whites or tiger sharks up here, but I'd imagine in South Africa, India, Australia or etc there would be similar rules. Got charged by a mother humpback. Her curious calf had swum around us, and we were between her and the calf. 2 of us never saw it coming. We were watching the baby, but our third diver watched her come. She kicked down and swam under us last minute. We didn't see anything until that 60-foot freight train passed just underneath us. I had a dive master that told me once he was diving somewhere and found a full skeleton wearing diving gear with the air on the tank turned off pretty deep down. If I remember correctly, they said they reported it to the police, and it was found out the man's wife turned off his air while they were on a dive to murder him. A coworker of mine goes cave diving and says that, while not super common, you do find dead bodies in swim gear in caves sometimes. People either go too far into the cave and then run out of oxygen on the way back, or they squeeze past a tight gap and get stuck on the other side, unable to come back the way they came. Cave diver here. The second one doesn't really happen. Not saying it has never happened, but that doesn't happen the same way it does on land, because you have easier vertical movement. Cave-ins, though extremely rare, can happen, but that's why knowing the area and researching alternate exits is important. The more likely scenario, however, is getting lost. In caves you use line and line markers to navigate. Because caves are complex, you have tees, where a line will intersect with another. You also have jumps, where you have to tie off your line to the main cave line, swim to another permanent cave line, and tie off to there. Each time you make a directional decision, you're supposed to attach a marker to the line, indicating the way out. However, if you forget to lay a marker, and you approach a blind tee on the way out of an hour-long dive, you've got a 50/50 chance of making the wrong decision. Or you mark your exit incorrectly, and take the wrong line, leading right back into the cave. or another diver takes your line marker because there was a communication failure and you're now stuck in a circuit, swimming in long circles until you run out of air. Half of a full cave course is studying how people die doing what you're wanting to do. You can dive in man-made lakes and check out what's left of old flooded homes and communities. It's pretty dark and spooky down there no matter what, especially when you think of all the big fish swimming around that are barely silhouettes until they're close. My buddy likes to dive in lakes. He said the creepiest thing, by far, is finding cemeteries 100 foot plus beneath the water in the dark. Eerie quiet. Someone just dove to the bottom of our lake to check a drain and now he won't go back under cause he said he saw a fish that could swallow him whole. Lol 20 plus feet long he said. Sturgeon? Fish can't be doctors. I dive myself, but heard this story from a Garda diver. In 2010 a man took a test drive in a car with a salesman, and in a suicide attempt he drove the car off the pier into the sea and drowned. The salesman managed to escape by breaking the window and swimming to the surface. The divers were dispatched to retrieve the other man's body. This isn't in the news report which I have a link to below for anyone interested. Simply through working in marinas at the time I was able to be part of the conversation with the diver in question. When he got to the car, he said, the man was still facing forward, hands on the steering wheel, eyes wide. He'd been there a couple of hours now. Where it gets creepy is, when the diver opened the driver door, this combined with a smashed window caused the currents to flow through the car and the man's wide-eyed head turned around slowly with the force of it to face the diver. I got told a story once by a Maori language teacher of mine during my time at high school. We didn't learn much Maori, just listened to stories. A dam in the Waikato, New Zealand had begun to have visible cracks in the concrete on the outside part of the dam and some drivers were organized to dive down and check the inside submerged part of the dam for damage on that side. While they were down there was the usual debris you would find behind a man-made wall which prevents the water from flowing as it would normally do if there wasn't a dam there. Turns out what they thought were large logs were in fact huge eels which had gotten to the size of logs due to being prevented from migrating to the sea, where they breed and die. So from being prevented from doing their natural life duties they just get larger and larger. That would be creepy seeing eels deep down in the water just floating around. When living off the coast some buddies and I would take regular fishing trips out to the oil rigs. We would always have some lines out and a few would dive down and try to spear some mangrove snapper or cobia. Once while I and two others were diving down checking out the structure we decided we needed to move due to lack of life around the rig. We all get back in the boat and as one of my buddies is reeling in a line we had a red snapper baited on, an easily 8-10 foot tiger shark starts chewing on it right behind the prop, so close I could have poked his eye out. The idea that massive animal was in the water, so close to me and two of my friends but no one saw it is terrifying. I bet he was watching us the whole time. An old WW2 ammunition ship off the south coast of England was full of brass-topped shells. Most had been taken by divers over the years, and it was now very rare to see them. Apart from a pile in one corner of the ship, this pile of shiny brass metals was miraculous unto shade, and remarkably clean. After spending years underwater, and you only found out why, if you swam near then. Out of the murky darkness the largest eel I have ever seen snags forward. Without exaggeration this thing had a head the same size as a horse's head, full of jagged teeth. I could not see the body as it looped into the dark and deeper into the ship. No one got near those shells. Turns out for years this thing had been guarding the shiny brass shells, slithering over them making them shine. We found out at the bar later that he was famous in the area and many people went to the wreck just to see him. No idea why this giant creature was guarding them like a dragon and its horde, but some said eels are like magpies and like shiny things. When I was a kid swimming in the lake at summer camp, I dove underwater, and I swear I saw someone in scuba gear hiding underneath the dock watching us. I told the lifeguard, but he wasn't able to find anyone. I used to teach canoeing lessons to Boy Scout troops at a local neighborhood lake. Super small lake that's not very deep, but the bottom was hella thick with vegetation. The water was dark, so you couldn't see your hands in front of you for more than like 5 inches under the surface. There was a small clubhouse, an open pavilion, and a playground all on the property. When doing lifeguard work in the water during a swim test, my sunglasses fell off my head. I dove down to find them, and shit you not, I found a sunken, entangled hospital gurney at the bottom of the lake. It took a few people to untangle it, but how the F it got there was beyond me. Clearly it had been under the water for years. I'm a commercial diver, and was once on a job cleaning a potable water reservoir. I'd been in other reservoirs before, but this was by far the biggest, at 40 x 80 meters. To get in you had to open a hatch in the ground, the whole reservoir was underground, and climb down a ladder. The hatch was in a corner, so when you were in the far corner of the reservoir, it was completely pitch black, and you just had to hope your light didn't go out. I was about halfway through a 3-hour dive when the batteries in my torch started going flat. I watched the beam get narrower and dimmer until it cut out completely. It's not a huge problem if you lose light, as you can just follow your umbilical back to the hatch. Just as I started walking back, some obnoxiously loud banging started somewhere in the reservoir. I was the only diver in there, so it both confused and scared the poop out of me. Needless to say, I ran back to the hatch as fast as I could. I ended up getting my torch changed out and doing another hour in the water, but didn't hear the noise again. I still have no idea what it was, but the combination of my torch going out and loud banging coming from somewhere gave me a hell of a fright. When I was a kid, we used to go to a place during the summer holiday which had some very nice beaches, and in particular an estuary with a very wide river mouth. One summer there was a king tide where enough of the water emptied out of the river into the ocean that you could snorkel quite easily from one side of the river mouth to the other, as it got so shallow that it was only a meter or so deep at the deepest part. One day I decided to snorkel across from one beach to the one on the other side of the river, and about halfway across, where the depth to the bottom was maybe half a meter, I was swimming along the surface looking down with my mask/snorkel on, and a massive stingray passed directly underneath me. This thing was easily 2 meters across, covered in white scars, and missing its tail. I just froze in the water, and it felt like my heart stopped. If I had let my breath out, I would dropped in the water low enough that I would landed on it. It was so close. I wasn't in any danger, but having a massive creature appear so unexpectedly, so close up, was absolutely terrifying. I've done a number of dives, and the strangest thing I ever saw was a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very rusted, and the deep freezer itself had to have been 30 plus years old, probably more. This was about 90 feet deep just off Vancouver Island, Canada. The situation gave myself and the other divers the nooby-jeebies, logged the GPS and depth coordinates, and notified the police. We were able to find out what was inside, since one of the divers had friends with local police. 10 porcelain dolls. Nice work. You have unleashed them from the watery prison that was protecting us all from their wrath. Rescue/recovery diver here. Every time I've recovered a drowning victim I get the creeps. Unfortunately, a lot of people are under the impression that every underwater environment is like the movies, and there's absolute clarity. That's rarely the case. One evening I got called out for a young girl that jumped from a bridge. She likely survived the fall and entry. We have a morbid term for what happened to her upon hitting the water. Plugged. I found her with a surprising amount of visibility in relatively shallow water. She was stuck in the mud to just below her knees, and you could see the fear locked into her eyes/face. There's nothing peaceful about suicide by bridge. I do not dive often, but I had gone to a lake with a couple of friends and we were all diving in different parts of the lake to look for others' lost belongings. I was bringing up an ammo box I had found. I looked over to a group of my friends at the dock and one was holding what looked like a small cloth bag, so I didn't really bother walking over to check it out and kept diving. Turns out it was a bag full of small urns with the same name on it. It really spooked us, so we figured whoever put it there wants it there, so we put them back and left almost immediately afterwards. I used to do a lot of night dives hunting for lobster off the coast of California. We'd start at 9 or 10 at night, so everything is obviously pitch black besides where we were pointing our lights. Every so often I'd get this unshakable feeling that something big was watching or following me. Sometimes I could quiet that part of my brain and continue with the dive. Other times I couldn't shake the feeling and would end the dive after a few minutes. It's a hard feeling to describe, but I guess I'd compare it to being in a haunted house, but 50 feet underwater in complete darkness. My mom used to dive a lot, Florida/Caribbean though, and she told me she used to get the same feeling on night dives sometimes. Not sure if it helps you or not, but she said on multiple occasions it turned out to be a barracuda hanging out over her shoulder using her light to see. So I got this same feeling on my very first dive in Fiji. It was a fucking barracuda behind me too. It's like they're so terrifying you can feel the vibes through the water. It's fascinating how your body can know something's wrong subconsciously. You're recording a lot more than you're consciously aware of. Things in your peripheral vision, sounds that don't quite register, vibrations in the air or water, echoes. We have an aeroacoustic wind tunnel at work. It sits in a room that is as perfectly soundproofed as we can manage. People find it very disorientating to stand in there because the echoes that you normally use to get a sense of the space are absent. Everything feels very muted and oppressive. You don't realize how much environmental information your brain maps until it's gone. I once went diving in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, where it is quite popular to see sharks. We begin diving, and we are quite far from the shore. There's a cool looking structure under us. We swim towards it to get a closer look, and I just start getting this cold feeling running through my body. And that's when a shark appeared, and I physically shat myself from fear. When I used to surf, I spent a good deal of time underwater, whether intentional or not. One day, I went out and surfed that was absolutely massive. For me, it was 10 foot solid all day. Bigger sets. Serious stuff. And it was a very dark, overcast winter's day, and raining. You couldn't see crap above the water, let alone below. At this place, the bigger it gets, the further out on the rock shelf it breaks. So I was at least 200 meters from shore when out of the gloom towered an absolutely massive set. Enormous. As big as I'd ever encountered. There were only a handful of other blokes out there. The wave was mine. At this point I wasn't scared at all. No, I wanted to get the biggest wave of my life. So I tried. I got onto it, but I just fricked up the position of my feet, ever so slightly. No chance of pulling out, so I tried to go with it. And that is when it happened. The scariest freaking water-based experience I ever had. I fell off, and this thing just took me to town. It lifted me all the way up, and over the falls. I thought I was okay, but no, it was just beginning. It just kept pushing me down. Further and further. My ears hurt, badly. It was completely dark, cold, even in a wetsuit. I came to rest on what seemed to be a very large smooth rock. I could feel it with my fingers whilst I was pinned firmly to it. I was held there for what seemed like an eternity, maybe 10 seconds. But then I could sense with my feet a ferocious current that seemed to stop at the edge of the rock. It was trying to pull me over the ledge and down. I could hear it. At this point I was panicking. Seriously, I can't quite remember how I escaped. I have rarely been that scared in all my life. I made it to the surface. I really thought I was going to pass out. I can't remember much more, but I must have paddled in so freaking fast other people noticed. They came to see what was the matter. I just sat on the beach. I could not even talk. I'm getting the freaking heebie-jeebies even reading my own recollection. This isn't my story but my dad's. So when he was in grad school he did some field studies classes, some of which involved diving in Monterey Bay. One day he was diving counting something off of the Santa Cruz Pier, and he finds a shopping cart with bricks and cinder blocks and a chain attached to the handle. He naturally followed the chain, and found a bare foot wrapped in the chain. He assumes something probably ate the rest of the body, and apparently his friends had seen similar things too. Also not mine, but my dad's friend. He says he was on a shelf counting mussels when he felt something tap his tank, and he looked around and didn't see anything. He figured it was a seal cause they like to play. When he was nudged again he saw it was a great white. He says he thought to himself, if it gets me, it gets me. I can't outswim it. Now I don't know if he was actually that chill, I sure wouldn't be, but that's how he tells it. The story isn't really mine, but from a friend of mine who does night dives. Here on the Brazilian coast there's a fish that resembles a shark, but it's considerably smaller, called caseo. You have to hunt these fuckers at night, because they're sort of nasty in the open, but easier to shoot when in their coves. So, my friend, let's call him Regis, is about 1 kilometer from the coast, diving near a reef. This thing is massive, and you have to go really deep to get to the slope with the coves. He is descending with a partner using cylinders for oxygen, and armed with a harpoon gun, the kind that shoots the harpoon and is reloadable, which is kinda heavy, making movement a tad slower. It's super dark at the deep during the night, and much light will alert the fish they're hunting, so they have to use flashlights that are weaker. Regis said he had a feeling while descending. Everything was off. The smaller fish were absent. There were no turtles. Water was murkier than the usual. His partner stays back with a flashlight, and he goes closer to the reef. Regis searches for the coves, but can't find any with the caseo he wants, so it takes kinda long. At a certain point, he feels a shift in the water, like something big is swimming near him, just as the weak light from his partner waves frenetically and goes off. He doesn't know what to expect and goes on flight or fight mode, except he can't ascend too fast. He then tries to stay at the same level, but he has his back to the reef now. Then cocks the gun with a harpoon and waits. Waits and waits, but he doesn't see anything in the murky night sea water, not even his partner's light. That had to mean one of two things. Either his partner went out of batteries, or he saw something, and didn't want to attract its attention. Regis finally decides to start ascending very slowly. The weird feeling he had got worse, and turned into chills. As he's going up, he feels that same shift again, and does not hesitate to harpoon whatever it was, but missed. He said he never saw something so big underwater, and it swam fast. As Regis couldn't see much in the dark, he couldn't make out a proper shape, but saw that the thing went deeper near the reef. so he tries to go up as fast as possible and makes out to the boat where his partner helped him up. Turns out his partner warned him about it with the light because he saw something abnormally big swimming in a dangerous distance, but couldn't get to him because he felt watched by the thing. They both call it the blackfish since they couldn't really see what it was. It's said to be as big as a man, about 1.7 meters. Regis lost the harpoon in the end. Both of them still dive at night. It's a no-no for me, though. Also, always dive in groups. Guys, if something happens, you gotta have someone to have your back. You never know. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content. What's the weirdest/coolest dream you ever had?